All right.
Hey.
I have got it. Thank you. Zoom. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about my woes with synthesizers for sound design. And this is not gonna be in any way a masterclass in synthesis nor in sound design. I'm just kind of just rambling about in the darkness. And maybe I'll revolutionize the synthesizer tonight, or maybe I'm just having fun. Like, we won't know. There's nothing wrong with synthesizers, and I'm not trying to solve a problem that synthesizers have. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more fun for me to work in sound design with synthesizers. And the difference between musical synthesis and sound design synthesis to me is that in sound design we are often trying to make something that is imaginary feel real and natural. Like you see someone walking down the street and we add footsteps to the person so it feels like it's real. And sometimes you're not adding footsteps to stuff, sometimes you're adding sound effects to the pod racers from Star Wars. Kind of thing. And of course it's completely imaginary, but we're trying to make it feel real and feel cool. So we're trying to match the movement of what we see on screen. And you can usually get away with some pretty bonkers stuff in sound design if you match the movement and the mood and the feeling of what is going on. And if you don't believe me, you should watch Raging Bull, Scorsese's boxing movie. And if you look at what is on screen and listen to what they're doing in the sound, it's completely bonkers. There are all the animals that are like you hear when they box. Like it's really, really strange. So yeah, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Concretely, when I work, I usually have like an animation or a bit of video or something in a video game. And it's quite precise. You've got 2.5 seconds for the person to do this move. So I don't really care about BPM. I don't really care about beats and bars and stuff like a lot of synthesizers do. And a lot of synthesizers, when they have the complex envelopes and stuff, it's still musical in the subdivision sometimes. And I don't care about that because my work is not musical. It's the video is not musical. So the concept of time indexing is very, very useful in this case. Because you can make all your envelope, and if it needs to be slower or faster, you just slow the time index down or speed it up, and it usually matches. So that's what I'm trying to do. Ultimately, this is really wishful thinking. I wrote this down so it sounds fancy. Ultimately, I want to be able to like freely sculpt the spectrum morphology of a sound. So how it develops over time spectrally. And it's not to have something to do with spectral analysis or spectral processes, but just the way it evolves. I want to be able to do that freely. And many of the synthesizers we do have inherit the interface from musical instruments. And that's really great because it's been developed for thousands of years, but it's not always what you want to do for sound design. There's that probably no link often between the two things. So I want to be free from that. And in modular synthesis, like Eurorack, the cables, do that really, really well. So maybe I'm just kind of itching towards the modular synthesis way of thinking, or maybe I'm already doing that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. And I'll show you the sound playing. I need to share my screen so you can see it. Any questions so far? Like, am I just rambling, or does it make sense? Sort of. Okay, good. Here it is. And I hope, I'm sorry you can only hear this through my speakers into the laptop microphone, but I hope it makes, you can hear something. So can you hear that somewhat? Okay. So here's what I'm trying to do with all of this. The VCS is a bit of a mess, so sorry about that. But it's a basic FM synthesizer. Modulator goes into a carrier, and that's basically it. And both oscillators are wavetable oscillators. So if we zoom into the carrier here, it's got, if you disregard the all the modulation things, you just got a frequency and a modulation level. It's phase modulation, so PM level, and the index of the wavetable, and the modulator has a scaling factor for the frequency from the carrier and its own index. And all of the rest of the stuff is just modulation. Next to them is the envelopes. And you can, I can kind of move this around and create different envelopes with my balls. And this is just input-output characteristics, so you can do the usual stuff with it. It has two parts. The other part is if I turn the curve bit down, I can turn up a very, very simple curve from one of Kata's examples. And you can just change it to be like that, or go up in the end. And this is quite useful. You can do a lot of stuff with just these shapes. So it's a nice, easy thing to have. There's two of them. They're similar. And you can route them to all the different parameters using the first two columns. Then the Lfos are very basic Lfos, just oscillators. And they'll go into the other columns. Down here is like a copy of the oscillators, but they don't change the frequency. They just show the index, show the waveform of the index. So the red one is the carrier and the blue one is the modulator. And down here, like how long is the curve duration, and a gap in between. So if you want to add reverb or something after this, you can add a gap so it gets to tail out before you hit the next one. There's also a little bit of chorus and I compress on it because I couldn't help myself. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. My biggest problem, I have two problems with this. And I think the biggest one is how busy all of this is. Because there's no easy way to route whatever into whatever in an ad hoc fashion. You have to create faders for them all, unless you have an idea. My other issue is these envelopes. They're not easy to work with. As soon as you combine things, you can't type the numbers into them anymore. And I don't know if that would be even beneficial or something I want to work with, but this is not easy to work with. I could make it unipolar instead. I don't know if that would be as much fun. But I've got two buttons. I can reset the Y coordinates, and I can spread them out easily on X. And if I take the middle ball, we'll push all the other balls out. You can clear the middle if you want to. The other one will just push the ones to the right or to the left. Any questions so far?
Dumb question. So we're just, the content you're playing right now is all oscillator based. There's no sample content that you're playing with right now.
No, it's just wavetables.
Okay,
and
cool.
This happens to be one of Christian Vogel's wavetables. It has, from one of his packages, like 141 wavetables in it, and they're in no like useful order, which is actually quite useful to me because it turns into a lot of really interesting transitions. And that's usually what annoys me about traditional like synthesis wavetable stuff, is that you dial up a wavetable and they all get like organ themed or something themed, but I don't care. Like just go from one insane one, like from a simple to a complex one, and make it weird. And this wavetables collection does that really well.
So you're modulating the index by either the envelopes or the LFOs or both?
Yes. So on this preset, the LFOs get to change the carrier a bit, and they also get to change the modulator. But I've got another preset that does something else. I think was this the one? Yes, I think so. So this is one of the concepts that works well for my case here, and it's the same envelope, and it's almost only that one envelope, the first envelope, that is doing anything. All the rest of them are just zeroed out. So the same envelope is changing the index for the modulator and the phase modulation level, a little bit of frequency, and the volume. And that means that if I move the balls around on this one envelope, it changes the sound quite drastically. Not necessarily for the better, but it did change.
And so those envelopes are getting triggered once per this duration?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Cool. Quick question. Andreas, what's the second XY coordinate plane thing? Is that a secondary envelope of the multi-ball thing, or is that something different?
On this one?
Yes, please. That one.
That's just a copy of the first one. They're identical.
Okay.
And you can just use, it's just to have another one. And they're just replicated. So I could make a lot of them if I want to, but I don't think I need to, because you can also make these patches so complicated that it makes no sense for someone to listen to. Yeah, so they kind of, you should, like down here, you should have a dividing line.
So you've got an ADSR section in the bottom left.
Yes, this bit, and that's just only like it's an extra control for the volume.
Okay.
And it will be gated for half the duration, and then go to the release stage. And for some things that might be useful, and it's a bit like if you run out of envelopes. Yeah. You can use this one for the volume in the end. I tend to maybe not use it as actually that much. There's another issue with this, and a big one, it's really nice to put all these faders in these nice aggregates, but they don't show up on the iPad. And also, this is quite horrible on an iPad as it is. It's just, there's way too much stuff for it to be useful on an iPad. And that's a big shame now. It's also running in 96 now, and that puts it on the third processor. As it is right now, it won't run in 192. But I'm saying this because aliasing becomes a big issue in this setup. You do like really wacky wavetable, like modulating each other. Alias is quite fast. So it sounds a lot better in 96 already than it does in 48.
And it's monophonic, is it?
Yeah, it's just one, it's not even unison or anything. Yeah. It's just a bit of chorus after it. I have loads of big plans for stuff I want to put on it. I want to make it quad as well, so you could do something in a surround space. Another thing, I had to put effects on this as well, because effects is a big part of all these. And being able to route the same envelopes to the effects and make the effects move will also help the sound a lot, I think. It's what I see all the Serum people do. That's why they use the effects that are inside Serum instead of post effects, because they will modulate with the synthesizer. It needs more. I don't know if it needs a filter even, but it needs some vowel-y stuff. It needs an equalizer and maybe some resonator as well. So let me just give you a quick look inside.
It's made of rocks.
It is. Surprise! These are the effects, phaser and compressor, and here comes if it will expand. There we go. Oh my god, that's a lot of stuff. So the LFO section is just this bit. And the envelope section is just this bit. And here in the end is the trick for making the balls in the right order. And the resetting stuff. So that's quite basic. And the synthesizer itself is a lot of this cascading into each other. Using Ian's multi-cycle, sample rate multi-cycle wavetable with time index. And the time index for that. And all of these are kind of the same. If you look at one of them, frequency control here, for the modulating oscillator, it's just getting these same 4 feedback outputs for the two envelopes and the 2 LFOs.
So you don't modulate any of the LFOs by, you don't modulate LFO2 by LFO1?
No, I could if I did it differently. I had to set up some other buzzing because they're replicated right now, but there's only 2 of them, so maybe they don't need to use a replicator. Maybe they could just like be normal.
I was just thinking, because you're struggling to hit 196 kilohertz sample rate. What are you saying? Yeah,
I think one of the things I could do is there is no real need for all these feedback ins and outs.
Yeah, those are quite. I think those can be quite expensive in
Yeah.
DSP.
And I think if it was just like building it, it was nice to plug the modulation into this mixer in the end, and use it like have them as buses. But they don't need to. Like I could put all the stuff here in the end because all of the other ones that get, you see, yeah, come on, Kyma, you can do it. They come from the same
Right.
output as well. So I could just replace these 4 with the 4 things I'm putting into the buses. And I think that would help a little bit. I also found out that it's actually not that interesting to modulate the index at audio rate. So I don't need to do that. Just go to copy rate on a few things. What else? Yeah, not doing anything at audio rate except for the frequency modulation. So there's a lot of room for optimization in here. And it needs to go into multi-grid as well for easy workflow with all the different effects. So the thing I want to propose to you guys is like, how do I fix my problems?
What's your problem again?
My problem is that routing stuff to stuff
Yeah.
in Kyma, it takes so many freaking small little widgets, and it's not nice to work with faders that are this big. It's quite tricky.
Yeah. We've talked about it. I know I've proposed a couple of times of having like a baseline matrix that you can use for lots of different inputs and outputs, but it's not an easy task because, well, for obvious reasons, right? When it doesn't, it's hard. One, it would be hard to encapsulate if I understand that process correctly, but also because you're putting together something that's ambiguous right from the get-go. But like, say you had like a 4x4 matrix that is modular of like, okay, these 4 LFOs or envelopes or what have you as a source to 4 different destinations. Even when you put it in, if you could build it simply enough, it becomes chaos.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not so far from that, Ray. I have more destinations than 4, but I don't need 4 destinations, I think, not at audio rate.
I think there's 2 patterns that we've seen on that, right? Alan has that pattern of, throwing things into the writer into like, feedback loops and then manually plugging those feedback loops outwards. And then there's the kind of the synthy matrix thing that we kind of collaborated on like last year, where you use the 8 in, 8 out. And that actually works pretty well, but it only kind of, it stops at the 8 in, 8 out range, right? It's past that, it's tricky. And I found that pattern to be the most valuable, but I don't know if it expands as far as you need it to expand.
It's actually more the question of the VCS.
Yeah. I think there might be a way. I mean, we haven't tried really building this, but I think in theory, if you don't need many connections at any one time, but you need the possibility of all the connections. I mean, one thing that we could try is, I mean, you still need to kind of create the same matrix of connections internally, but as a kind of control mechanism, have a kind of like a switch of which one. So you can conceptualize it as, say, you have 5 kind of cables, and you can basically have a drop down of what goes into the cable and a drop down of the destination of the cable, in a sense. And that might then simplify it. So you have like 5 faders, but then at the end of beside each fader, you have a drop down of its source and a drop down of its destination, which would then do that kind of matrix connection in the background. So you still got all the connections that you've got right now, but the VCS would be quite simple because you'd only have 5 faders.
So,
or something. Yeah, I say 5.
So just a second. So in this case, look at the PM level here.
Yeah.
If I have 4 extra, like I need this fader.
Okay.
Need to set it. Then Then I'll have a drop down for the source, drop down for the destination, and drop down and a widget for how much.
Yeah.
So I'm saving one.
If you have to have all those four, yeah. Well, possibly, yeah. If you need to have all those four, I mean, if you're thinking of it conceptually as, you know, if you've got like 10 outputs and 10 inputs, you've got a matrix of 100. So it could be a massive simplification of that if you only ever need so many. But like, the way you've divided it up, it might not give that much. If you still need all of
Yeah, how fine of control are you looking for? Are you looking for something that you can really dial in, or do you looking for something that's kind of more interdependent, but like, you know, where you can say it's more binary but interdependent, if that makes sense? What I mean by that is, like, for example, in one of our examples, we said if you mix two sources together, we divide it by, you know, either like a square root or by 5, so that, you know, they mix together well. And then if you have 3 sources, it mixes together well. But there's other strategies to kind of, you know, mix the inputs rather than just saying, okay, this one's 0.1, this one's 0.05, this one's 0.03. I'm just curious, like, how fine of control you're looking for.
I was thinking along those lines in the beginning. That's why these are called envelope mix, because I thought I'd be mixing a lot of stuff into 4 different buses. Then it turned out I didn't need that. I do need, if you see here, like, I do need a quite small, like, need to dial in quite precisely. Also, the modulation on the frequency is a bit bonkers. I think I did that wrong because it's very extreme right now. But a small, also because there's so many wavetables in this wavetable, it needs to be quite precise.
And
I
you're
think
not.
we would save you a bit more, because like you've got here on your red row there, where you've got C freak, the log freak to the left of it. I mean, that has an implicit destination. I mean, this is a row for a destination.
Yeah.
So the destinations are implicit. So if we're saying, well, we only want to use one of those 4 inputs at a time, you could imagine that all of those 4 become effectively buttons. It could be a single drop down, and then you just have an amount. So like whichever one we've chose, now I need an amount of that thing. So that it could turn into a single drop down and a fader.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you need that log freak. That log freak to the left, is that basically the base level that you're adding to? Or is that okay. So you still need that base level that you're departing from. But you could turn that whole thing down into maybe, you know, 2 faders and a drop down instead of 5 faders.
Because another bit of the departure from the musical synthesizer is that I don't want to press any MIDI keys to make it make a noise. Like, I get really annoyed sometimes with tools that are made for sound design, but you still get a keyboard and you need to press the keyboard with the mouse. It's like, why are we doing this? Surely it's easier.
Do you perform this with anything? I mean, do you use like the continuum or anything to kind of?
No, this is auto gating itself right now. But it will have a button at some point that will disable the auto gain. So you could trigger it with a key down from a sequencer. So if you're doing stuff to video, you play it like the video and just make Reaper or whatever, send out to MIDI, and it will trigger this envelope at the right point. I think that would be useful, just as a whatever MIDI you give me, I'll just play.
Yeah.
But it should make noises immediately and just make it go, want to do stuff immediately and not reach for MIDI keyboards.
Andreas, with respect to sort of the matrixy thing, are you considering, like, do you want to have multiple modulation sources to one destination?
Some part of me say that I will definitely want that, and then the other part of me says, well, the best results we've had so far doesn't do that.
Right.
So maybe it could be achieved by mixing the signals in another place. So they could be listening to one of the 4 buses, and I could add something onto a bus. So do if I want to add a little bit of randomness, a little bit of slower modulation to a thing, I could do that in the modulation source instead. But that would go everywhere. This is complicated. I kind of want to like take this source and just drag a line and then just modulate that bit. That's how Kyma works.
I mean, similar to what Alan was suggesting earlier, where in fact you have a pull down menu and a level, right? And the pull down menu determines which source of modulation you've got. If you actually just went and said, well, actually, I'm going to have 2 pull down menus for each. Right. Now that means that I don't think it's going to be very rare that you would need 3 sources of modulation simultaneously, but it's quite possible you might need 2.
Yeah.
So all right, so that's, you've now got 2 pull down menus, two levels, but it's, at least you don't have 4 of everything everywhere. So it's
I will need to have like 2 faders of how much from this modulation source if I have 2.
I think you would want 2 faders, because it might be that one is doing a vibrato, one is like an LFO, and the other's an envelope.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't want those 2 levels to always be fixed relative to each other.
Yeah.
So you need a slider for each pull down.
Yeah. I start to get into thoughts like, or maybe I would have a crossfader. So I only have one thing, and then move them, and then that becomes a nightmare to adjust. Because you can't adjust one without adjusting the other.
Yeah.
Like, oh no.
And you'd still need a level, so you still need 2 controls.
Yeah.
Because you might want your modulation to be not much, as opposed to pushing it all over to the other side, you know.
There is, however, something that occurs to me now: the pattern of having multiple markers on one fader, and have one of them be the bass and the other one be the modulation amount. That could simplify it a little bit.
Or if you reflect the markers, so one's on the...
Yeah, you can only do that if you actually just place 2 faders on top of each other.
Oh, I see. But you mean if you actually, yeah.
Yeah, you can combine them in an aggregate. That won't work in your iPad, but
if you do that, how do you know which one's the bass and which one's the...
you don't. You just, it's a leap of faith every time. That sounds a bit annoying as well. Because I'm not trying to make it like a tool for inspiration and sonic exploring. I'm trying to make a tool that will do my work at work.
Okay, what about another version, which was Alan was also mentioning, is in effect you have patch chords, right? You have a quantity of patch chords, and each patch chord has a switchable destination and a switchable source, right? But you don't show those on the screen. What you show is a patch chord number at an import or at an input, and that same patch chord number. Let's say we have a total of 16 patch chords, right? And what you do is you click on the patch chord number at the front, and that will become number 1. It knows you've just pressed number 1. We'll keep a record of that. And then if you press a destination, that will become number 1. You've then made a link, right? Now, then you press another source, that will automatically, it knows the last one you had was number 1. So this is going to be number 2. You press a destination, then you have 2 and 2 written up. So you can look at the numbers and say, oh, well, there's one. That's obviously a connection between those 2 points. And so you're now doing, although you don't have physical cables hanging between, and you don't drag from one to the other, but you do a click and then another click, and that will actually say these become the same. Now you may need to have things that a little button that says add or parallel, whereby what you do is you turn the parallel on, and then if you click one input and another destination and another destination, then all 3 will be tied to the same patch chord number. And then you turn the parallel off, and then from then on it's just going click 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 click, and it will be 1-to-1s, you know. Now, it might be quite complex to actually get it working, but I think that maybe you might find it's more natural to operate. And so basically, you've got a number and a fader and a level.
It's kind of pushing something that I struggle with many software synthesizers.
Right.
I boot them up, they come with like an awesome sound in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I look at how they make it, and I cannot you can see all the parameters, but it's just too complicated to understand what's going on.
Right.
Initialize the patch. Now it's very easy to understand, but it sounds kind of shit. And if at least here I can quite easily see like everything that's kind of going on,
Right.
because it's kind of on the surface, the whole thing. I don't have to decipher this.
Yeah. There is that. Yeah, there is that element.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna mark about with how to make the VCS manageable. And then the other bit, I don't know if you heard that, but the other bit is of course the interface for envelopes.
Yeah.
And
I mean, can we not tie two hot variables together? So one hot variable will show on the screen as a dialable number, and the other, the matching hot variable will be the dot. And basically, the rules are that we move one, it changes the other; move the other one, it changes the first one. They change each other, so you can dial in numbers as well as move the actual physical dot, and both. And is that something that is
maybe because I'm using triggered sound global controllers to make the balls stay in order.
Yeah, it's the same principle. So at the moment, what's happening is that the ball is moving a neighbouring ball. What we do is instead we say the ball is going to move a fader with no fader, you know, a non-fader fader, and the reverse is true.
Yeah.
So
I haven't tried that. Have you tried that, Alan? If you can have two triggered sound global controllers control each other?
We might want to test that out. I mean, you could imagine it getting in a loop if a user kind of has changed in last millisecond, and one's changing one, and then the other one's a triggered sound to global controller changing the first one. You could have issues there, but you might not need to do that.
Can it recognize that it's being changed by the other parameter, or being changed by the user? If it can differentiate between those two,
we spent a day doing that once. Do you remember, Pete?
Wasn't that with these balls?
It wasn't with these balls. With something else we were doing. We were like doing. Oh, we need to know when we're being changed by the user or being changed by the the algorithm, and that was a job.
Right.
I remember it became quite a serious piece.
I thought that was actually when you was holding the mouse button. This was you hold the mouse button, and what we was doing was we were trying to emulate the fact of holding the mouse button could be detected, how long you was holding it for, and when you released it. That was quite the same thing.
It's not quite the same thing, but that was quite.
It might not be so difficult, because basically what we was doing is we were saying, let's make it oscillate a bit, and then we could tell if someone was holding it down, it would stop oscillating. Therefore, we know that someone's holding the mouse down, and that was that was really quite something. But I think this might just work. It might be easier if you just say A equals B and B equals A sort of thing. It may not.
It's something to test out.
You could.
And another little thing that it's nice to see the envelope that's actually getting drawn.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start mixing these two, you also see what it's actually doing. That's nice. But managing this window in time is tedious.
Right. So there is an answer to that. You have two of them. One of them that's a fixed time, right, and the other one that you vary. The other one is sort of a copy of it, same controls, but that's what's actually doing the sound. So you've got two curve generators, one purely for visuals and the other one purely for sound. I know it's expensive.
Like actually what I'm doing for the
mean, that's what I was thinking. You remember on when we was actually doing the curve generators, for convenience, I was permanently re-triggering it and sending it to the scope. Now I was saying to myself, well, what we could do is actually have that, even if we weren't triggering the envelope, we could actually see what the envelope was doing because we had a triggered version that was a copy, you know, and it's just for the sake of generating graphics.
That's a very good point, because I kind of want these windows to just stay fixed, so you also can see where in the time window that is defined down here with the duration, where is this actually happening.
I do that all the time as to create displays. Is just, especially if this is like a wave shaper function or something, is you just make another one. I tend to run it at 100 hertz, so you just run a time index through it, and it's like probably like what you're doing in the oscillator.
Or if you have it even faster, then basically the waveform will adjust as you move it. You won't even have this sweeping across thing.
Oh, you don't see a sweeping across at that. It's it just constantly rewrites, but the time index is going fast enough. It does, you know, it's you don't see it. It doesn't.
But it is twice as much processing power, of course, to do such a thing.
Well, it's only another time index and a wave shaper.
Yeah.
Depending on what's causing how you're creating the envelope to start with. So
it's the input-output characteristics.
Oh, right. So it's just another input-output characteristic.
Oh, is that what you're doing? This is not the curves that we did then? This is not that curve maker?
No, it's not the talking thing.
Oh, I see.
No. This is very.
Because waveforms are coming out look so much like it. I'm thinking to myself, have we gone over the top with this other thing with all the calculations to
now, the thing is, like this, I have no way of saying like you should only curve a little bit with this bit, then curve a lot here and be exponential here. There's no way of doing that.
Right.
If the input, I can't remember if the input-output characteristic is stereo, which it might be. You could run a fast time index through the right channel, and then you wouldn't even have to make another one.
You're nuts.
Do you think it would have a stereo index?
Sorry?
You think I could see it having a stereo output?
The way, the wave shaper doesn't have a stereo input, I don't think. No.
No stereo index, no.
No, it has a stereo. You can take a stereo waveform. I don't know. Yeah, it's probably the same. You probably need two input-output characteristics, but then I don't think they're that expensive.
I mean, Kata claims that it's one in, one out.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions? We should see. Anybody still with us? Yes, we have.
Or suggestions for how to, like Jason, how to make this even cooler.
I'm curious to see if you have used this to design against video. I don't know what you can share with us because I know there's
absolutely nothing.
That's what I'd like to see this used in real time, design against an animation. It could be something not your game, but yeah, I'd like to see the performance real time manipulation of this, and then that I think just seeing it in use would reveal like where it shines and where it definitely needs some work on sanding up the rough edges. But I don't know if we could do that in real time.
Actually, to add to that, I missed the beginning. Did I actually miss the part where you actually made some noise?
Yes, I think we did.
Oh, okay.
But I can make some noise for you.
I'd like to hear something, yeah.
That's one preset. So I'm discovering how messed up the balls get from triggering presets, because they move around really fast, but they also get to set each other. So It sounds
mean-
kind of weird.
while the preset is being fired, it's all the rules are being put on it so that it actually mucks up what. Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
But it could be a matter of saving the presets a little bit more carefully. So the oscillators have their own presets here. So I am messing it up a little bit. It's not set up properly yet.
right.
That's
Are
kind
you
of what I
going?
was just-
Sorry, Chase.
Go ahead, Alan.
I was gonna say, are you going to add a chopper to it?
Yes, of course.
Come on, Alan. You need.
Silly question.
So this is actually another thing. I'm kind of like, to do that, I need to not add volume modulation to it, but kind of not subtract, but I need to, I can have a curve coming in and out with volume, but then I need to subtract the holes in that to do the chopper thing. I'd rather do the chopper thing inside the modulation than adding a chopper afterwards. But maybe it's just easier to add a chopper afterwards.
I would have thought so, but
So you said something that kind of was in line with what I was thinking, where it seems like all these little, I wish I could draw on the screen like we can Slack, but looking at the area of the PM level to the right of that and the log frequency, the different areas, it seems like if you had like 4 to 6 toggle buttons with pre-selected presets that you know are kind of in the realm of these work, I know these work, that would kind of give you a good starter place. So if you jump to a new preset, but you change the wavetable and things are off, you could just quickly toggle the buttons there and jump to some different presets that are specific to that area of the patch.
Because it does, I'm with you completely, because it seems like the oscillators are kind of their own little thing inside of this, and they can have their own setups, and they need to tune quite thoroughly to be good, and then all the modulation can just work with many different presets. So I think you're absolutely right, Jason, on that observation.
And I've got a kind of a dumb question. Where is the gain for the sound sources here?
The gain?
Yeah, so where can you adjust the individual levels for, because you've got one wavetable that you're playing, or two that
I'm playing one wavetable into another,
okay,
as the frequency modulation. So if I turn the PM level down, you're only hearing one oscillator. Well, actually, always only hearing one oscillator.
okay,
You never hear the modulating one, you just hear the result.
yeah. I guess so. The PM level is the gain of the modulation.
Yeah.
Wave. Okay, and then the one that's being modulated, the primary source is
this bit up down here. Yeah, I can draw on this one. Where's my mouse?
Because that's, I guess, what I'm getting at is like what's most important for me when I'm making sounds is just being able to grab the big important knobs fast and then being super clear. So if I know that this is the input gain and this is the output gain and this is the saturation, just like those should be this much bigger than everything else. That's just kind of a UX note.
Yeah. It's funny because they seem to, in this case, to me, matter a little bit less, because it is just one oscillator we're listening to, so it can be like full volume. It will fit in the audio channel. There's no way that one oscillator won't fit. But then it hits the compressor, and then it cannot fit anymore. But yeah, I mean, the layout of this is quite hopeless at the moment.
I must admit, I enjoy the consistency of the colors of your labeling there in terms of frequency, amplitude, and time based.
That helps me a lot, actually.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So just if someone watches this on YouTube at some point, like green is amplitude, and red is frequency, and purple is time. And blue, if I had any blue, is like you can't change this; it's generated by someone else.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm gonna adopt that. That's really neat. I have a question about the iPad control, Andreas.
Hmm?
I'm not excuse me. I'm not familiar with the Kyma control because I'm using Lemur on mine. So are you able to zoom into different windows or have it as toggled pages for different embedding layers, or?
It follows. Oh, this is a cool thing to talk about. It follows your VCS completely. However, it does not follow your secondary VCS. And here we go. The secondary, you can choose something else. I can choose just the envelopes here. So I can zoom in and out of stuff on the big one and make the iPad follow. And I could have, or maybe just have the overview on this one.
Dude, your VCS management is off the scale.
I know, I'm agreeing with that. That's why I'm like, how do you manage presets, dude? Like, you must go insane.
I just don't enable the thing. Don't ever touch what I just did. Don't do it on the secondary VCS. Just show and hide the preset list. That gives me stuff.
Well, my thing that I ran into over the weekend is the main preset list was not saving the secondary or the embedded layers.
Oh, but it is. Here's the thing: the warm docs up here is saving only the settings of this dropdown, not the thing in here. So the only setting that is saved is where this preset list is set. So you have to, if you did changes everywhere, you have to save the sub ones in new places as well.
Yeah. That was the mistake that I made over the weekend. Is I thought I had saved the sub one correctly, and obviously misclicked or something, or did something daft, and the big one didn't save it.
But you have to fire them all independently, or can you fire them all simultaneously with one?
And this one up here will remember which was selected down here.
I see.
So do you think? Sorry.
But you can say that you shouldn't. Where do you do that? I think there's somewhere to go. Affected by presets, yes or no? Affected by dice, no. That works the old way. You just click it.
So when you say affected by presets, that's the level above it.
Yes, you can say that this carrier thing will not change no matter what I do to the one above it. It will stay the same, or it will change with it. But when you randomize stuff, it just randomizes the presets here. Which is quite cool with Jason's idea, because if all these ones on the oscillators, if they all sound good, you might actually want to hit the random button and get some cool stuff. But of course, if all the modulation on all the oscillators gets scrambled completely every time, it's mostly just useless.
So do you think, I mean, is there, for something like the envelopes, is there a case for like not having a preset, but like something that asserts a useful starting point? Because the actual envelope you want to save in the global preset. This is my sound, but there's some shapes I want to start from. So like, because if you create a preset within the env sub window, then you don't get to save anything anymore unless you save it as its own sub preset. But if you hit a button saying call up the this set of values,
I think there's something to investigate how expensive triggered sound to global controllers are if you don't trigger them.
Yeah.
Because then you could just keep making new.
Mm.
Like, but I mean, these buttons are effectively preset.
Yeah.
Just make another one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you could make a thing. You could imagine a thing that has a certain number of, there's so many balls there. What, you got 6 or 7?
Yeah.
So you have 7 triggered sound to global controllers, but you have an array of values that then get loaded into those 7. So when you hit go, so you don't end up with 14 or 28 or whatever. So if you have like 4 or 6 standard envelope shapes you want to start from, you have this thing that has an array of all of those numbers, and you kind of choose from some drop down or whatever. Give me this sort of sub preset, if you like, this kind of starting point number 4, hit it, and then it will use those 7 triggered sound to global controllers to assert those values, but then let's go. So that might, like you say, if you have too many triggered sound to global controllers, that also affects DSP in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it seems to do it when they're triggered or when they're gated.
Yeah, when they're actually being used.
So maybe you get to like not pay for it if they're not gated.
Yeah.
It's tricky. Yeah, but I got some really good ideas, especially with the displaying the curves by making another visual version like the oscillators.
Brilliant.
Easy to see what you're doing. And I will meditate on the user experience. So Jason might use this one day.
So you've been we've been going for an hour. This has been a fantastic presentation, Andreas. Should we stop?
I think we should wrap it up there. If anyone else has any,
I mean, we can keep chatting, but maybe we should stop the record at this point.
Just in the end, just for future sound designers looking at this, shout out to the Kyma compressor. It's bonkers. It's amazing. It's the worst thing and the best thing. Use it.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Andreas. That was a fantastic presentation. The first of our presentations for the Kata.
Amazing.
Thanks a lot.
I know we're going to build our own compressor and really go off the deep end. So